Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card using Copic markers and the Paper Smooches Squeaky Clean stamp set. The video is a bit long, I apologize for that, but there's quite a bit of coloring, so hang in there and we'll get there in the end. So here's the stamp set. If you'll notice, there's only one machine, a love machine. On the card I had two machines, so you'll see how I just used that image twice to make two machines. So I'm using Neenah 80-pound solar white cardstock, cut at 5.5 inches by 4.25 inches. Here I'm just sort of laying out my scene. I'm going to be using my Misti to stamp all the images and do a bit of masking. I am planning on cutting this card down a bit, so I wanted to be kind of conscious of where I was putting those stamps and leaving enough room for a little bit of trimming on all around the edges. So I'm going to start with the machine on the left. I want to make it look a little bit different than the other one, so I'm not going to stamp the heart on the inside. At first I thought, oh, I'm just going to use my ink and I'm going to stamp around that heart, but that got a little bit finicky. So what I decided to do in the end was I just took a Q-tip and I wet it with a BB wipe and I just took that heart out of the middle there. I'm stamping it using Memento black ink. Works really well for use with Copic markers. And here I'm stamping the second machine. You don't have to mask the heart out in that one. I wanted to make them look a little bit different. The one on the left is supposed to be a top loading washer. And here I'm actually just marking out where the wall behind is going to start. This is a little dust bunny. I just think he's so cute. I wanted him peeking out behind the washing machine. He's so cute. He's so cheeky. He's weaving his little paw. Anyway, since I had already stamped these images before, I already had a mask already cut out. So I'm just using some post-it tape, stamping onto the image onto the post-it tape and then just cutting around it. Masking is a technique I like to use quite a bit. It was a little bit confusing at first, but what I realized was, you know, whatever image you want to be in front, you do first, and then you just mask that off, and then just keep stamping in everything that falls in. Looks like it's sort of in behind. So I'm not a very good stamper, and that's why the Misti really works very well for me. But even using the Misti, I didn't line things up very well here, and so I just sort of had to change the line for the shelf. It's okay, it works out in the end. So now I'm just marking out my background behind the washing machines. I wanted to make it look like a tile wall behind there. So I'm just marking it out, oh, I think it was about 1/2 inch vertically and 1/2 inch horizontally. This isn't brain surgery. This is just making it look like a brick wall. I'm using pencil. I know that there's a little bit of debate about whether to use Copics over pencil. I don't put a very heavy pencil line on there, and I try to erase a little bit too. And you know, quite honestly, I can replace the nibs on my markers if I need to. So I don't know. It's worked okay. It's worked okay for me so far. So so now I'm just marking the inside of the heart. I wanted to make it look like a window with silver trim around it. I'm going to go back in there with some Wink of Stella later on and make that a little bit shiny. So I've gone over that inside of the heart with the Copic multi-liner, and I've erased some of the pencil lines, and I'm going to start coloring now. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with red. I think it looks really nice, but I don't know. I'm looking on a small monitor right now, and I can see that already on the right-hand side there is a big red splotch, and so all through the video I'm just sort of trying to avoid that as I'm coloring. My light source is going to be from the left, so I'm picturing it as a laundry room maybe, with the door on the left and the doors open. So anything that's on the right is going to be in shadow, and then anything on the left is going to be a little bit lighter. I colored right over the circles for the knobs, and in retrospect, that probably wasn't a very good idea. When I made the card the first time, I spent a lot of time going around those circles, and I kind of thought, oh, that was a waste of time, but I can tell you now that it wasn't. Especially with that red, I plan to go over the knobs with the Silver Wink of Stella, and the first time I did it, I had a white background and it turned out fine. But you'll see at the end of the video that red sort of seeped into everything, and what I ended up with in the end was just some shiny red knobs. So you'll see I'm using my Sandy Allnox hex chart. I use that quite a bit. I find it very, very helpful for helping me select colors. And you can see on the top I've written down the colors that I'm using, because what I'm realizing as I'm using that chart is that, you know, the colors are not necessarily in numerical order. And so sometimes I get a little bit mixed up about which color is the darker one. I'm working on the laundry basket here. I wanted to make it look like wicker, so I've gone in with some light color in the middle of the weave, I guess it would be. So whatever is light is going to look like it's sort of rounded, and then with the dark on the sides it's going to make it look like that's in shadow. And again, shadow on the right hand side because our light source is on the left. Using a little bit of my Woo marker for the label on the laundry detergent. I wanted to make it look like it was, I don't like just leaving stark white, and so I just wanted it to read as white. So the W00 is a really nice marker for that. All through this process I was sort of struggling with my W markers. W00 all the way up to W3, they were pretty dry, and I was in a bit of denial about my W1 situation. So anyway, you'll see that things are sort of split into clips here, because I had to stop in the middle and actually move my camera, because silly me, that's where I was storing my re-inkers. So anyway, yeah, it would have been smart if I had, you know, filled them all up at once, but I didn't. I thought, oh, it's just one. So anyway, now I'm going to be erasing a little bit of the pencil lines here, just so I just have the suggestion of the tile lines. Now I wanted to make it look like tile rather than brick, and so if you think about a tile, it sort of comes out from the wall a bit, and so anything that is on the right hand side is going to be a little bit darker than what's on the left hand side. And so I'm just right now kind of filling in my vertical lines a little bit using W1. I think this might have been before I re-inked this one, I think. And then the shelf is there on top, and I wanted to make sure that I had a bit of a darker line under there. So now I'm just going in, and the right hand side is, like I said, is going to be in shadow. So anything that's sort of beside that dryer is going to be a little bit darker. And then going in with something with the W3 a little bit darker. Now you can see that red dot there. I was really trying to avoid that. One thing I learned about working with reds, you can do a lot with your colorless blender, but somebody said in a video I watched a while ago, if you make a mistake with your red, you know, learn to live with it, because it's not going anywhere. And so I was really worried about going over it with a marker and spreading it. Like I said, I'm going to be trimming that on the edge anyway, and so I was just really fortunate that it ended up being that far over to the right, but I was still trying to avoid dragging it all over the whole right hand side of the page. So just marking out now the right hand side of a few of the tiles. I'm only working on a few at a time because I want to make sure that the ink is still a little bit wet, so that it'll blend a little bit better. I'm starting out with my darkest color in W5. On the right hand side where it's going to be a little bit darker, I'm going to be using W5, W3 and W1, I think it is. And then as I move over to the left where it's going to be a little bit lighter, I'm going to change the combination of markers that I'm using. We'll see. No, I see. I lied. I see a W0 there. Yeah, I must have given up on the W1 by this point. Oh no, there it is. Oh, what do you know? Anyway, there's my combination. I'm not going to talk anymore about which color combinations I was using because it's right there. You'll be able to see. Anyway, just continuing to color the bricks using darker on the right hand side, avoiding that red dot. So this goes on for quite a while, so I'm just going to sort of speed things up here. It takes a while. I think it's worth it in the end. You know, I think I like the way that turned out. It's something that takes a while. I quite enjoy making scenes like that. I don't mind spending the time. I think that it's worth it in the end. It looks like a lot of work. It kind of is. But you know, you just keep at it, just keep doing one brick at a time, and eventually you do get to the end. So as I'm moving across from the right to the left, the tiles are going to be they're going to be looking a little bit lighter. So I'm changing my color combinations to a little bit lighter combinations as I go. I think there's a couple changes. I'll change in the middle and then over at the left. But not just the colors are changing, I'm actually changing the way that I'm coloring them a little bit, where I'm actually taking the dark not quite as far across the tile. And so my ratio of dark to light is a little bit less on the tiles on the left-hand side. So that's the tiles done. Now I'm going to start coloring the shelf. Again, our light source is on the left-hand side, so I'm just filling it in with the lightest color right now, and then I'm going to go back using the darkest color on the right-hand side, W8, and then I'm going to be using the next lightest color, blending that into the darker color, and then finishing off with W3. So it looks like there's a shadow on the right hand side, and I'm just going over the edges with the Copic multi-liner so that it looks like the rest of the image with the black outline. And there was a little white gap there, so I filled that also in with the Copic multi-liner. And I'm going in and coloring the window to the dryer. I want this to look like it's bulging out a bit. I'm going to go over that later on with some glossy accents and make it look more dimensional. Now just going in with some, I think that was W8, putting some shadows in. And this is sort of where things really started to go wrong with my W1 marker. Starting off with the darkest color and then blending into lighter and lighter, and eventually I was going to go to very, very light. And my W1 gave up. So I refilled it and came back, but I gave up. So I just went with a dark floor. I think it looks fine. Went back in and filled a few details in that I had missed. The towels in the laundry hamper. Again with a shadow on the right hand side. So once I've done that, I'm going to go in and put a little bit more shadow on the right. It didn't look quite, there wasn't quite enough contrast for me, so I made it a little bit darker on the right hand side. Just went over my existing coloring, and then I wanted to make sure that I put a shadow underneath the shelf because that's going to make it look like it's actually sticking out from the wall a little bit more. So again, starting with a darker color and then blending it into lighter color. I'm apologize for moving out of camera there. I was a little bit flustered after I had to refill my W1 marker. So anyway, eventually I get back up into the middle of the screen here. I figured it out. Okay, so now I'm going to take some silver Wink of Stella. And I really love the Wink of Stella pens. I use the clear Wink of Stella quite a bit. And I also have the gold and I have the silver. And I just really like the look from the gold and silver ones. Now you can see here that I had left some white behind in the heart, and that was really well, turned out really well. Again, I had colored over those circles for the knobs, and it looks fine right now. But once I eventually went over it with the Glossy Accents, and then it just kind of sucked up some of the red, and it didn't. It looks okay. It just didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted it to. But if you look at it right now, it looks really nice. So. Anyway, going back and putting some shadows on the right hand side above the shelf. So I had an idea that I would fix up that little red mark in front of the spray bottle with my colorless blender, and then I thought better of it, and I just went over it with a white Signal pen, which I think was probably a better idea. And now I'm using the Simon Says stamp rectangle die set, making sure that I line it up to get rid of that red mark on the right hand side. Readjusting. And there's the finished picture. So I'm making a card base using Neenah Desert Storm. I believe this is 100-pound cardstock. I cut it at 5.5 inches and then scored it at 4.25. And I made a second card base. I'm not using 2 card bases. While I had my scoring thing out, I thought I'd make another card base for use later on. I'm adhering it with some Tombow Extreme Adhesive, and it is extreme. It got stuck to my fingers. So now I'm just going over a few of the details with some Glossy Accents. It's in a different bottle, but it is Glossy Accents. I moved it into this bottle for the fine tip marker. There you can see I'm putting Glossy Accents on the knobs. I already talked about that. And then struggling to get the cap back on. So I'm just putting some highlights on the corners of the washer and dryer to make them look shiny. And I just couldn't leave well enough alone, and I wanted to put a few more shadows on the side of the laundry hamper and the laundry detergent. So that's the card. Looks like it's done. I forgot to put Glossy Accents on the window of the dryer, so going back in and doing that. You notice that the light is different because it was nighttime by the time I realized. So that's the final detail of the card. I didn't put a sentiment on it. I felt like there was enough going on that there didn't need to be. I don't quite often put sentiments on the front of my card. I usually put them on the inside, just because there's usually so much going on the front. I thought it might seem too busy. If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging in there until the end. Please feel free to comment. I would really love to hear what you have to say, and also like, subscribe. Thanks so much. Thanks for stopping by.